Hi, good evening. I'm delighted to be the host this evening for a talk on purpose and nation building careers in the social sector. I think it's a lovely title. Uh, a special thanks to Partha and the team at IMB, and of course to my distinguished guests this evening. A small short introduction of myself. I am the CEO of ILSS, a leadership and learning organization rooted in the social sector. We aim to build the knowledge, capabilities, and skills for and of the social sector. But I think more importantly, we see ourselves as the biggest champions and brand ambassadors for work in the social sector. We believe it is the best place to be. It needs the best minds to be working here. It does have the best minds working here. It's also the most rewarding place to work. And hearing from my guests this evening, I'm sure will underline how I feel it's always deeply inspirational listening to them. Uh, and just a little note on India as a country of great contrast, staggering poverty, 800 million that live in poverty, but also the third highest number of billionaires. And let's not even talk about the pandemic billionaires that we read about. Considered one of the fastest growing economies, get 131st out of 189 countries in human development indices. We boast nearly 3 million nonprofits, yet we can probably count on our hands the nonprofits that have an annual budget of, say, over 100 crores. Many are small and scattered, high on passion, commitment, intent, work, but often lacking in resources. But despite all these contradictions, the silver lining is in the fact that during this pandemic, especially, civil society organizations once again rose to the challenge and have been first responders. They have showcased why we need them to exist and to more than ever and to serve the poorest and most marginalized. We know that we need them now more than ever. The pandemic also underlined the need for a robust, strong social sector. But the good news is that funding in India is growing, philanthropy is growing, not only through CSR, but also from first generation HNIs who are giving back in significant ways. I do believe very strongly that we are at a strategic inflection point in the life of this sector, and all of us really have a role to play, really each and every one of us. We really need to rethink our role as citizens, because this is not a problem that's out there. This is a problem that exists for all of us. What are the legacies we're leaving behind for the generations to come? How can we be a part of the solution? I will start by introducing my very inspiring guests on the panel. So Shavita leads Central Square Foundation's efforts to improve educators' capacity building and development, teachers, principals, and administrators. She also oversees CSF's organizational development. She brings to the team more than a decade of professional experience in management and education. Her corporate background includes work at the Boston Consulting Group, Global Vantage, and Citibank. She's also been a visiting faculty in the human resources and organizational behavior discipline at various business schools in Delhi NCR. Her primary areas of interest are teaching and research, organizational behavior, and leadership styles. Earned her bachelor's degree in economics from Sriram College of Commerce, and she graduated from, this is her alma mater, IIM Bangalore in 2000. Shavita has been and will always be a big advisor to ILSS, a strong mentor to me personally. And I'm just delighted to have you here, Shavita. Shall we?
Anu, thank you.
Welcome and thank you for being here. Shrikant is the Chief Executive Officer of Janagra Center for Citizenship and Democracy. Such an important work that he's doing. It's a Bangalore-based nonprofit working with the mission of transforming the quality of life in India's cities and towns. I think about the work that Shrikant does at so many places and so often. And someday we will do that whole course on cities. I think it's so important. Janagra works with citizens to catalyze active citizenship in city neighborhoods and with governments to institute reform to city governance. Shrikant's focus area in the urban sector has been city systems, reform spanning Janagra's flagship report, the annual survey of India city systems, A6, and municipal finance. Isha, can you just mute everyone? Shrikant has been an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for 15 years, and prior to joining Janagra, worked in the banking and audit. So both are corporate crossovers. And my last guest is Ravi, uh, an entrepreneur, angel investor, and mentor with 22 plus years of experience, recently transitioned to the social sector. Earlier, he was a founder and CEO of PushEngage.com with customers in 150 countries, which was acquired in October 2020. So he had an exit. He's a mentor for NGOs and for social startups at IIMB NSRCEL. That's another thing about the social sector and these acronyms. He also mentors startups at Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship Game and Foundership Accelerator. Earlier, he worked as principal at Southeast Interactive Technology Fund, a 200 million early stage venture fund. Prior to that, he was equity analyst in the Bank of America. He started his career at HP, Hewlett Packard, working as software engineer and later in business development. Ravi is, so Ravi, I'm announcing it, I can't help, is currently a part of the Indian Administrative Fellowship in the Agricultural Department with the government of Karnataka. This is very new development, not to be shared outside as yet. The announcement hasn't been official, but as Ravi is ILSS alum, we just want to take credit for everything really soon. So congratulations, Ravi. He will be working with the additional chief secretary. He's also currently undergoing the ILSS program as a part of the 10th cohort. So welcome to all three of you. I'd like to start with Shavita. Shavita, the whole journey, the transition journey, maybe 7, 8 years ago that you decided to take, what were you thinking then? What was the transition like? And a question, an added question is, what do you really think for this audience? What is the mindset shift that you feel one needs to have to make that transition? So,
Thanks, Anu. It's a longish answer, but when I was doing my undergrad in the late 90s, I think there was always the desire to work with an NGO. And I'm talking a time where words like social sector and development sector were not even common vocabulary in India, right? And so if you thought in terms of I should leave my society better than it is right now, and if you're a girl growing up in Delhi, there's not a dearth of issues around which disturb you at every level, right? So there was always the desire, but unfortunately, there wasn't the gumption or the bravery to pursue a MSW. So I'm a generation where the default was that everyone was writing CAT because that's the attractive sector, that's where the money was, that's where the glamour was. And so the default happened. In all honesty, and I think in hindsight, it worked out very well for me. I think I got an opportunity to learn, build my perspective, fully, truly understand what it meant for me personally when I wanted to think in terms of what am I doing for the society versus just for myself, for my family or my immediate circle. Very fortunately for me, so I took a sabbatical when I had my kids and got into teaching. I think there is always jobs and career decisions do depend on right place, right time. I think I was very fortunate then when I was ready to look at a second phase of my career. The development sector in India had gone through a very, very interesting evolution, right? We had the Companies Bill Act had come out. I genuinely believe India has been a very giving society. Even if we look at our industrial houses, the Bajajes, the Tatas, they've always set up schools and hospitals and little townships around their industrial units. But post-liberalization, as young India started making more money, as the Companies Bill Act came, and as also India started becoming relevant for every social agenda at a global level. Right? You can't talk about realizing SDGs unless India gets its act together. So I think with all of that, the sector in India had gone through a very interesting transformation. Was very fortunate to actually then become a founding member when we were starting Central Spare Foundation. How education happened, I think, very intuitively because all of us have been consumers of education. And I think all of us can, very tangibly say where our education has helped us beyond just landing the first job, right? The credibility it has added to all our journeys. So the whole, for the penny to fall that when you're working on education as a lever, you're not just uplifting the individual benefiting from the education, but that knowledge of family as a whole. that's the transition. That's how the timing of my moving into the sector happened. That's how education as a sector happened. Very quickly responding to, and I'll keep it brief because I'm sure we've discussed this further to the second part of the question. I think I'd say a couple of things. One, for anyone looking to move to the sector, there needs to be a clarity on why you're looking to make this switch, right? And of course, there is the deep desire to do well. I genuinely believe somewhere the deep desire to do well is also a very selfish desire, right? We want to feel we are doing good. We're contributing and making a difference. Let's acknowledge it for that. But it's not a flippant decision. Don't think of it as just another job. It is a meaningful career switch. It does have a learning period. The learning period is longer only because our sector is still evolving and shaping, right? My last corporate job was Citibank. If I join another bank, I think just the transfer of skills is so much easier. I think it's much harder in our sector only because those structures and processes are still getting set up, right? So own the decision, be sure about it, do your homework as you explore it. And I think second, and I think the second part is actually applicable across sectors. Learnability and adaptability is key. Our sector is not as mature as, say, consulting or investment banking, or even a functional role in an FMCG company is. And a lot of those structures and processes are still getting built. So your ability to adapt to the situation, your ability to learn and contribute to that process becomes very critical. I think COVID has impacted the world, of course, but the impact that it's had on the development sector and the agility that the development sector has had to show in times of COVID is just a testament to how it does become more challenging and more complex in our sector.
You're on mute.
Anu, you're on mute.
So, Isha, in my request, can everyone mute themselves? I ended up muting myself. The way that you can mute everyone? Okay, thanks. Shrikant, to you, what was that journey from chartered accountant working in the corporate world to this, to moving to, you know, starting Janagra, and what was your learning and your unlearning or your relearning? Anything that you would like to share? Love to hear from you.
Sure, thanks, Anu. It was wonderful to hear Shweta. So for me, there were two key drivers. One, I was working in Bombay, and I think the inequity in Bombay was quite kind of stark. The contrast between corporate life and life on the street when you're walking can be quite stark and unsettling in Mumbai. So, there's some kind of a dichotomy.
Can you speak up, or am I the only one who can't hear him very well?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a little louder will be helpful,
Yes, yeah.
Sure. Okay, is this better? Yeah. So there's some kind of a dichotomy with life in Mumbai, particularly in South Mumbai, which can be quite stark. And the second is I played out my career, and I figured that while there'll be a lot of personal enrichment, the incremental learning, and learning not just from a professional technocratic standpoint, but learning about oneself and the world around you, would actually flatten out very quickly. And thankfully for me, I didn't have a child. I didn't have a housing loan. So I could afford to take a few risks. And the corporate career did help me get married. So that key accomplishment was done. And my wife was extremely supportive. She's the one who, in fact, helped me apply to Janagraha through a portal. I didn't know anything about the development sector. I interviewed with one organization in Mumbai. I went for the interview, and the interviewer didn't turn up. And then she called me and said, "Oh, sorry, I forgot about it," and stuff. But I figured that the living in Mumbai as somebody who didn't own a home in Mumbai came with its own challenges, and I couldn't really afford a career in the development sector in Mumbai with the kind of pay they were offering me to be the CFO of that organization. And thankfully for me, I had applied for a funding role in Janagraha, but I got a call back saying, "We have a municipal finance program. We think you'll fit in better there." So I actually got lucky. I would have assumed that for somebody with zero background in the development sector, I'll basically have to, be a CFO of a small nonprofit and then hang around for 2-3 years, learn about the sector, and then get a shift into the into a proper line role. But thankfully for me, there was a crazy organization doing work in a crazy area. So I got into municipal finance in Janagraha, and my original plan was to experiment for a year or two, and then take that risk and say, worst case, it's 2 years of your career down the drain, which is okay, which is not too bad. And I come back to the development sector, to the private sector. But this worked out great, and it's now been 10 years almost to the day. On Sunday, it would have been my 10th year in Janagraha and in the sector. So it's been great so far. In terms of learning, I can think of 3 things that I think about the most, reflections in that sense. One, it's more a journey of self-improvement and a journey of humility and curiosity. So what starts off as saying, I want to create impact, almost becomes like, this crazy project of human development, which is a function of governance and democracy, is not something that one individual can have the hubris to solve. Is many times not a journey whose completion you will see in your own lifetime. And I've come to look at, people like our freedom fighters who died before 15th of August 1947. I've come to look on people like Martin Luther Jr. or Abraham Lincoln and others, and even several women activists who fought for gender empowerment, and who haven't lived to see the fruits of their labor, in their own lifetimes. But that's the nature of large challenges that face humanity. It's really not about what you can do to it. It's about what that problem can do to you as an individual, and what kind of fulfillment and realization it can bring about in you. So that's one. The second thing is, I think there are 2 distinct, at the cost of simplifying it, I think there are 2 distinct kinds of careers. I actually hate to use the word career in the social sector, because as Shweta said, I completely agree, it's not really a job. At the cost of hyperbole, I think it is a mission. You're giving yourself up to a mission, realizing that, the mission could take years or decades to get accomplished, or even centuries in the case of things like gender, right? Or even race. The 2 kinds of organizations, or the 2 kinds of approaches that I'm seeing, one is about fixing the system, which in turn can fix problems. And Janagraha is one such organization. And the second are organizations that fix problems, and through that fix the system. And both of these are really not, they are complementary approaches. They are equally important approaches. They are not competing approaches. One is not superior and the other is not inferior. But I do believe a certain degree of self-reflection on where we will fit in better, I think would be beneficial. And like in my own personal journey, the reason I love working in Janagraha and continue to work with Janagraha is I'm sold on systems thinking, which is at the heart of Janagraha's approach. So every day when I used to go back home from Janagraha to hail an auto rickshaw or to get a bus or a taxi, when you walk on the streets, I was able to relate back the challenges of our cities to our city systems framework, to our own theory of change. And my own intellectual frame, my own personality lent itself better to work in Janagraha, because I really don't, I don't have a bleeding heart. I don't mind confessing that. At the same time, I don't mind working on challenges and not seeing the results, right? So, and there are many, many such attributes. Whereas if I take a wonderful organization like, say, Akshay Patra Foundation, they started off trying to fix a problem, right? But they've grown so big and they've become so good at what they do that they have a deep impact on the system itself. So you could take both approaches. In Janagraha's case, I don't get instant gratification with most things that I do, right? One of our recent big victories was to influence more than 1 lakh crores of funds that went to urban local bodies in India. It's a lot, it's a big impact. Do you see the fruits of it in terms of human beings that are impacted? The answer is no. So that's the second piece. The third piece I want to say is, when you're considering that, considering this switch, and I'll close with this, I think it's important to recognize that the project of human development, the project of governance and democracy is not exclusive to the government or to the nonprofit sector. The fact of the matter is, you need governments, You need civil society, but you also need trade and business and markets. And therefore, what you do matters less than how you do it. You could very much be in the markets. You could very much work in a company and contribute immensely to the project of human development or to governance and democracy. So ultimately, it's about how you do it. And therefore, the differentiator for me is not whether you work in a corporate or whether you work in civil society or in government, but what you choose to do in that role. The fact of the matter is, in India, as as Manish Sabharwal and others say, it's a lottery of the womb. We are all, victims or victors of, of time and place. Many of us have our hands tied. But the fact of the matter is, how you do it can actually make the difference. You could create deep social impact by remaining within markets itself. So it's really a point of self-reflection to see which path do you want to really choose to create the social impact.
Absolutely, Shrikant. And I love what you and Shavita are saying. It is a mission. And that's the way one should look at it, when you approach this work. And congratulations on 10 years and no looking back. Ravi, to you, you're a recent entrant. What were you thinking? And, what are some of the things that have made you make this transition that you could share with us? Yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think after Shavita and Shrikant, I think they covered a lot of amazing points. So it's hard, but I'll tell my story. And let me tell my story. So I think first off, why did I come to the social sector? So I think it's been a journey of sorts. I'll tell a little more of my background. So I started off as a software guy doing sales. So I've done 5 career switches. This is my 5th career switch. And I have been through, and whenever you make a switch, you have to go back in the line and learn again. So you got to be ready for it. And I've always followed, I guess, what my heart is at, right? And I joke and say I followed the path of lower salary. So I was a VC in the US. Prior to that, I was a banker in the Wall Street, right? So from banker to a VC, and from VC to an angel investor, and then from there to be an entrepreneur, right? So, and again, I've got lucky also, I would say, and worked hard in the journey. But I have kind of followed my heart. So what has come out in last few years has been more of a self-reflection. Some of the stuff which Shrikant mentioned. So over time, I do realize that wherever you are, it doesn't matter if you do it with the right way. So that's been a big realization. But having said that, it was really strong in me last 3-4 years back that I had this notion. I'm also, I don't know if I can use word spiritual, but I have been largely that. And Swami Vivekananda has been a deep inspiration. And his quote, which says, "They alone live who live for others," has been in my ears for last 20 years. And it was just those 3-4 years back, I said, what am I doing? Oh, I am making one more startup. Okay, what will it do? And the other thing which always had in my mind was, when I die at the deathbed, what remains is the shots I did not take. So I do not want to miss out on anything. So as a result, I've done so many things, right? The 5 things now, and the 5th one, right? And with that in mind, I said, okay, what can I do? My company was doing exceptionally well. I realized, okay, what if I sold it and just devoted my last 20 years? Instead of, I feel I came too late. Maybe I should have jumped in at 30 or something. But I said, okay, 45 is not late too. I got 20 more years. And the good part of that was like, okay, because I was able to get an exit, of course, which a lot of luck or divine grace as you may have, I was able to go to my family and say, listen, we are covered for a while. Can I now plunge in and not worry about, the money part? And I think so that's been my journey so far. But I also will also share that I also started preparing for it few years ahead of it, right? So I have been involved with a couple of NGOs. Parivar is one of the NGOs on malnutrition. I have donated and also work on a advisory with them for almost like a year now. I also started spending more time with IMB than SCRL, and just kind of doing more stuff on the ground to understand as I make this transition. And then of course I used ILSS as a program, which was, by the way, recommended by 2 folks which I look up to. For example, Atul Satija from Nudge, he himself recommended when I spoke in January, do ILSS, and Makin from Udyam. Both people who came from the corporate world said, hey, you have to do ILSS. So I had to do it. And I was like amazed to see the breadth which I learned. And then it helped me think through. So 2-3 things I had to make a choice. One was NGO versus, running an accelerator kind of a model. And I had all those options, and I'm happy to go deeper if somebody is in the switch. And then finally, for me, the biggest thing in the government sector was 2 things. Why I picked up the one that I did was, still the fact is in India, the largest, social sector organization are government, right? And coming from a for-profit world, hardcore capitalist mindset, it's actually a huge stretch, to be very honest, for me, right? But that is my belief. I got to be in the system to make the change, and I can't be saying that this is not happening, that is not happening. What can I do about it? And so with that, I said I'll do it. I got to be in there, and again, maybe it's still my ego speaking when I say I want to make a big impact. And I think, like Shrikant said, we are actually trying to improve ourselves. But again, I'm still taking the journey, but being fully aware that it has a potential of making an impact, and looking forward to it. But yeah, but like I said, I explored many things, and I felt this was the best. So I'm here now.
Oh, lovely, Ravi, and we are so glad you're here. You've crossed to the brighter side, and really all the best on your journey ahead. We love to follow your work at the fellowship. So do keep writing about it and talking about it. It's interesting. I have 30 more minutes. So Isha, should I open it up for questions, or should I have more questions? What would you rather I did? You will have to.
I think we can open it up for questions, and either people can type in the chat box or unmute themselves and ask the question to the speaker they intend to as well. I think that's the format the Alumni Association things work.
Okay, maybe they could just raise their hand. We could call them.
Yeah, so we can. Yeah, you can raise your hand and unmute and ask the question. I see Arvind Kamath was wanting to ask a question.
So go ahead, Arvind. Introduce yourself and ask the question.
Arvind, are you going?
Arvind?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a question now. By mistake, I think I.
Oh, okay. So who is the next?
Okay, then bye.
Who is next, Isha?
Anyone else who would like to ask a question? Rahul?
I think they have people raising hands in Zoom. Isha, you can check.
Yeah.
Oh, but I don't know how to identify.
So Divya, Anupama, and Pankhuri are there. So.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Divya. Hi, everyone. So I kind of represent the mid-20s class. And I know I think you can also predict what question I'm going to ask. So I'm a student in IIM Bangalore. I have worked in government sector before. I was a governance consultant before doing my MBA. So I already have my heart in place. I did my work X, so as to say, enjoyed it a lot. But now when I reach out to the mentors in this sector, the problem is that everybody has eventually went to this sector. Nobody started with this sector after they graduated or did their post-graduation. So the relatability is so less and the risk factor is very high. So when you ask them how to build on now, they'll be like, okay, 2 years, just work in a consulting firm, build your skills and eventually enter. Maybe that works for me, but I won't be happy or satisfied, so as to say, So I'm just representing that class. I've heard this question a lot from my fellow mates also, and I'm seeking an answer for it. If you can just guide me, I'll be happy.
Shavita, would you like to go?
Divya, I'll actually, we actually are onboarding a person who's a graduate from IIM Bangalore class of 2018. She did do, Tejaswini did do a consulting stint. That was the campus placement. I think right now, somewhere we hold back where we don't have the organizational wherewithal to participate in formal placement processes of business schools. So I just wanted to share an example. We do have a relatively young graduate joining us for a full-time role. I do understand. See, there are, and let's be honest, right? The two reasons you get this advice for working in the corporate is not just to build your skill set. The elephant in the room is also the education loan, right? I'm very fortunate to be a generation where even an IIM degree was relatively affordable enough, very unlike today, right? So there is the real challenge of, if most of us have availed of an education loan, how do I service that while on a development sector salary? I think second, of course, and I will be the first one to admit that compared to some larger corporates where even processes like induction, professional skill building, or just getting you job ready. And I know that your batchmates were probably majority of them have already worked before coming to Bangalore, unlike my time. But still, right, that last step of getting ready for a job becomes the other reason that, why don't you get some corporate experience, do some technical skill building before you move into the sector? Very legit concerns. I can just reassure you that now increasingly organizations are able to attract and retain younger graduates from management schools. Not only do roles exist, I think career pathways exist. The other issue also becomes, okay, am I doing it because Is it temporary? And where, you know, and Srikanth also very honestly shared, okay, let me try it for 2 years, right? Otherwise, I always have the safety net of my degree or the corporate job where, you know, people like Srikanth and I or even Ravi have transitioned from. But I can assure you that there are organizations which are now not only able to attract, but retain, groom, and grow people to middle and senior management positions. So please do keep an open mind. And there is more than one perspective on how younger talent can be absorbed.
Thank you, Shweta. Next, we have Anupama who had a question to ask. And after that, Mahendra and then Pankari.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. The question I have is, I am in the path of starting it, meaning I have quit all my corporate world responsibilities and job. And it's been a year. I'm just sitting and thinking about how do I start? Where do I start? My interest lies in education and leadership. I am a certified coach. So I would like to, I mean, this particular seminar really interested me because it opened my eyes that there are ways to do it through the government. So, but then this is something very new to me. I was not aware of this. So from where can I start? And which is a resource, or what could be my first 1 or 2 steps to get started is my question.
Srikanth, do you want to answer that?
No, I can see Anu, identifying a potential ILSS student there.
I was about to say that you're all smiling and looking at you, Anu, to respond.
Yeah. No, Anu, probably your best place to respond to this, isn't it?
If you want, I can take it too.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, so I wanted to also tell Divya one more thing before I go to your question. See, the thing you got to understand is my view, okay? The earlier you start, I mean, just go with your heart. The second is there is a lot of demand for younger people to talk to the teenager. There are a lot of initiatives, for example, happening for 10 to 19-year-old, which a person like me may not be able to do better at, right? So just think of opportunities that fit you and you can do a lot. That's what I wanted to say. To Anupama, one thing I wanted to say was just start, okay? Just do it. Okay, for example, I can tell you 3-4 things, for example, which I did. Started volunteering. Okay, nobody says no to volunteering. If you want education, volunteer, right? And then if you have some other skills where you can teach, I know Anu can talk about many of those fellowships which exist where you can teach kids, right? You just do it and then be in the radar of the people. Make a list of all the NGOs which are in education. Just like, do a job search, you make a list and then just work with them. I mean, and then of course join ILSS.
So Anupama, I do believe that the sector needs talent, needs more talent. There is a lot of talent, needs more talent. And one of the things we do is really try and get people who are interested in a career in the social sector, or a mission of working in the social sector, to sort of understand the landscape and understand what they're getting into, make a more informed decision. So yeah, do look at, Isha will reach out to you in any case. But this is what we do. We passionately believe this is the place to be. And like Ravi, I'm also on my 6th career avatar, and the world is changing so fast. Most people in the next generation will at least have a couple of careers, but really this is the place where I also have found my home, and it's deeply rewarding. So yeah, do definitely, like Ravi said, do it. Just do it. So yeah.
Thank you, Arun. Next, we have Mahendra. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mahendra Rathod, and I am part of IMB 2006 batch, and I am also founder of a NGO called Trek Nomads Foundation. We started in November 2020. In fact, after thinking for so many years, I also took the plunge. Unfortunately, I am not able to kind of get out of my corporate job and do it full time. However, we are doing whatever we can in terms of the impact which we want to provide. So my question, I have a question and then I have a comment and probably some kind of suggestions on the comment. So the first question is, let's say NGO like us, and we are trying to solve a niche problem. The problem is basically we are trying to provide benefits to the remote mountain villages, where the connectivity is one of the biggest issues. And since we are also into trekking, we have that connectivity and the reach. We are mostly in the mountains for 6 to 7 months. So we thought, we will at least provide some kind of benefit to the mountain region people. Now the biggest issue which you are facing is definitely, I mean, all of you would have gone through that, is funds. So, so how do we raise funds? I mean, I have reached out to all my contacts, and I have done a lot of cold calling, etc. And I'm sometimes I'm also surprised by the amount of donation people make. For example, one of my IMB classmates gave me 2,500 rupees. So I was like, okay. So how do we raise funds in a more meaningful way and in a more institutional way, so that we can do what we can? And I want to leave my job and get full time into it, but I'm not able to do it because of certain constraints. Yeah. So this is question number one. I'll come with the comment. The comment is basically, again, I'll be a little honest with you. So I thought, okay, since I'm interested into social work, and why am I, even working in corporate sector? Let me go to an NGO, larger NGO, work there, and then, take out some kind of financial liabilities which I have, and then, simultaneously get exposure and then go full time into my NGO. However, the salaries which we get in NGOs are actually very, very bad. And as Shrikant said that we are it's a lottery of the womb, right? So not everyone can actually take that plunge because of the responsibilities and liabilities. So so I mean, when we talk about salaries in social sector, it is like a taboo. People are like, oh, how are you talking about salaries? No, it should be self motivation. I understand it is motivation, but there is something else as well, and that is probably I'm trying to touch upon the questions which Divya also raised and Anupama also raised. How do we kind of get talent? Because a startup NGO who is actually a startup founder who is absolutely not doing any value in the society gets celebrated in our society, whereas an NGO a person, I mean, however small or big that person is actually not celebrated. I mean, is penalized.
Shrikant, do you want to answer that or take a stab at?
Okay, there are
fundraising.
Different.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I think he's wondering about his fundraising. How does he raise funds for this?
Yeah.
And anything you could share?
No, I think that at least even within the 10 years that I've been in the sector, I think salary levels have caught up, quite rapidly. The sector has become far more sensible in recognizing that you can't expect good talent to come in if you're not able to provide them some semblance of financial security and at least some visibility into financial security. So I think things have actually improved quite a bit. But what you're saying is true. It's not easy. So you will, for me, finally, if you work out your, if you secure your financial future based on a certain set of aspirations that you believe you and your family desire for, and you work backwards from there, I believe it is definitely possible for someone who's an alumnus of IIM Bangalore to find a meaningful career in the development sector in India today. I can say that unequivocally. However, whether to begin with that will exactly fit into an area that you choose may or may not be. So for example, if you're looking at something as niche as you're looking for, will you find an organization like that in India that is able to fulfill your financial aspirations? Can't call it aspirations, but your financial minimum needs. The answer could be no, right? However, the advantage that you could have possibly is that you could cut your teeth in an NGO for 2, 3, 4 years, particularly in fundraising. You could pursue a career in fundraising or in governance, given your background, given your education in IIM Bangalore, and then you could use that to build up your own NGO. It is certainly a possibility. And I think if you've come so far as to say that I'm passionate enough to do this over and above my job, I think more than half the battle is actually won, because it's much harder to do what you're doing now than to pursue it full time. Right. The reason folks like me are doing this full time is I don't know how to do this part time. So I think you're doing a great job. More than half the journey is done. You could easily find a role in a large, not really in a large NGO, but in any NGO that's able to fulfill your, a combination of 2, 3 things that you have in mind in terms of finances, in terms of the kind of role and in terms of what you're looking forward to in building your own NGO. And then I'm sure it's not so difficult to raise funds. That's one aspect. The second aspect on raising funds is fundraising in the nonprofit world, and I can speak to this more authoritatively than Shweta or Ravi. With a wink, I say this because Shweta works for an NGO founded by Ashish Dhawan, and Ravi could himself be a funder, but it is like running on a treadmill, right? Raising funds for an NGO is like running on a treadmill. And I can tell you it's hard work, because in India, somehow the conception of NGOs is whatever money you raise should be spent in the same year. Right? And it's only about charity, it's only about giving away to charity, and it's about beneficiaries and so on. They don't believe NGOs need to be built as institutions. That's a different conversation. But it is hard work. So even if you're founding and funding your own NGO on an ongoing basis, there is no guarantee of funding, right? Because if you do a great job in your NGO, doesn't mean you will get money. Unlike in the private sector, where you're in the business of selling goods and services. So if I have a great year, I've sold a lot of goods and services and I've got money. But in an NGO, you do great work, but your donor decided my strategy has changed. I'm no longer going to fund you. You're left high and dry. That's a fact of life. It's happened to us many times. So that's something that you have to brace for from the beginning. That there is no guarantee that you'll raise funds, and people will give you funds, maximum for 3 years. They'll give you maximum for 3 years, and many corporates will give you funds for 1 year. But the same corporates may give you funds for many years, but they'll give you 1 year at a time, and they leave you on tenterhooks. That's a fact of life. You have to brace for it. There's nothing else to be done. But having said that, is it possible to raise funds sustainably? It is. Organizations like us, which do not have endowments, we do not have endowments, right? Our founders were capable of fending for themselves as a family, and they cut a check of $1 million over the first 5 years, right? They couldn't do more. We had to go out and raise funds, and we've survived for 20 years and we've thrived for 20 years. So it is possible to do that. So I would say, like Ravi, take the plunge.
If I may quickly add 2-3 quick points. Also, when we think of social sector, in my view, NGO is not the only place. You got to look at, I'll give you an example. I was just in a chat with BCG, right? They have a social sector practice, right? So your version of going into the social sector, just building on what Srikanth long back a little earlier said, it does not have to be NGO. Why do we always say it's NGO, right? The second is there are so many social entrepreneurs, right? Social oriented companies, right? Which are being funded by impact funds. That's the second flavor you can look at, right? And thirdly, I want the fundraising. In fact, it's interesting. I am a consumer focused marketer or a B2B marketer, and I'm actually doing sessions for NGOs in the past on how to do fundraising. And I'll put in a plug for Anu's ILSS fundraising program again. But why I share this is, like, to me, this is a marketing, activity. See, you have to do the good work, and then you need to know how to sell your story. Just like we raise funds for our startup, we need to know how to. So there is a possibility. I mean, I'm happy to go chat deeper offline if you want to, but I'm actually doing a class on this with ESOCAM in like 1 month from now on how to do fundraising using consumer-oriented method. I know there are experts here, but I know what we do in consumer, which is touching the consumer on an emotional point and connecting one-to-one. You can even do, direct fundraising. But remember that 2,500 you spoke about is actually a lot of money. That's also I want you to remember. That 2,500 adds up, and if you do that kind of model, but that's a different model. A lot of people prefer large corporation, but I am the other point. How to add up those 2,500 is what I kind of focus on. So that's what I was.
Great.
Shweta, do you have anything to add?
I'll just, 2 points, Mahendra. I think one, like Srikanth shared, at CSF, we had the advantage that our founder was our exclusive funder. And that was the first part of our journey. I think as we became more ambitious, as our work gained more salience, we do now go and raise external funds. So one is, again, at the startup phase, you will need to lean on personal saving, friends and family. There is honestly no nicer way of saying it. But think of it as the angel investing will come from a known, trusted circle of friends. I think the desire or the wish or the hope always is that you find an anchor donor early on. who not only supports you, but also becomes a brand ambassador. And a lot of what are today the larger NGOs, when you spoke about the 100 crore plus, right? They had the benefit of starting with a mentor or a board member who not only wrote the first check, but became an active ambassador of their work. So I think just how you need to think of, at least for the first couple of years, and I do want to re-emphasize Ravi's point on the retail fundraising. And especially, and again, it happens to all of us in all our alumni batches, when we go back and try and fundraise in larger groups, then I don't think it's about the denomination as much as the number of people who want to become a part of the purpose. So maybe you also need to categorize who's your anchor donor, who can then help you raise more funds, who are your institutional donors, but especially in today's time, and COVID has taught us this time and again, please don't underestimate the power of retail donations.
Thank you, Shravata. We'll move on to the next question. Rahul has a question, and after that, Pankuri, and then I see Subrita also. So Rahul now.
Hi everyone, good evening. So I just completed the 1-year MBA program from IIM Bangalore. And before that, I did Teach for India, and I was part of ISLI in Mumbai, so India School Leadership Institute. So got chance to interact with Shravata during our meetings. So just like, one thought personal about the career and one about the sector. So first I will talk about the sector. So we have often heard that there are two schools of thoughts. Like one says that NGOs and even non-profit initiative, they should work towards creating some kind of revenue. But other school of thought says that if NGOs will focus more on generating revenues, then their energy and focus, which will whatever the amount of revenue that will get generated, there will be more harm will happen to the funds they are getting. So how should just your thoughts on that? Like non-profit initiatives should focus on generating revenue, or your experiences and any light on
that. Good to see you. To be honest, there's a regulatory constraint for not-for-profits even generating profit and revenue. So by definition, the top line, which is the income or inflow, typically income in our kind of organization ends up being donations or funding that we get, right? From a regulatory perspective, even if any of us start monetizing a part of our work, that cannot go beyond 25%. And the regulatory, I'm not the expert on the details, but because there are tax exemptions which not-for-profits get by definition for working for a social good and not for profitability. So to that extent, the conversation which at least we've actively heard, especially in the EdTech world, is a hybrid model. Is there a way to set up a hybrid structure which allows me, if I'm generating revenue in one arm of my organization, I can innovate, I can test, I can invest more because the business model is different. And part of the collateral benefit can support what I'm trying to solve for on a social issue. Again, it does have its regulatory constraints, but strictly speaking, and I would love for Srikanth and Ravi to weigh in, strictly speaking, there is a regulatory limit to how much of revenue generation or profit making an NGO by definition can even get into from a tax structure perspective.
Srikanth, you want to say?
Yeah, just to build on what Shravata said, so if you are registered as a trust, then what Shravata says holds good, which is that not more than 20% of your annual receipts can be fees for services, and those fees for services have to necessarily come from activities directed at the mission that you've laid out in your trust deed. And the downside risk, if you breach the 20% limit, is your entire annual receipts for the year gets taxed, at the applicable rate. So the fact that you have an exemption from paying taxes is contingent on you getting less than 20% of your annual receipts as fees for services. That's one piece, but you can set up a Section 8 nonprofit company which can undertake nonprofit activities and generate revenues, but that gets taxed. So you should be willing to pay taxes on that. You don't get tax exemption. You pay tax like any other company. You could even have a social impact enterprise which is set up as a for-profit company, private or public, as Ravi mentioned earlier, but it's a fairly different model, right? You run like a company. You could even have, investors, private equity investors, venture capitalists, etc., taking a stake and so on. So you may have to run it like a company. The other possibility, of course, which is slightly more kind of evolved, another variation of the hybrid model that Shweta said, like one of our sister organizations both has a Section 8 company and a trust, gives it more flexibility. Some other parts of our companies are, somewhat an adaptation of the Tata model where you could have a holding company which is non-profit, which is Section 8, and the subsidiary company can be profit-making. So we have large enterprises, in fact, like that, where the promoter stake is in a Section 8 company to retain the core social purpose to make that undiluted. But the subsidiary companies, like Jana Small Finance Bank, for example, which is a large bank funded by some of the largest private equity companies in the world, is completely for profit. But the promoter stake is a non-profit. So there are various models, but I think core to the question is, what do you want to do? Right? The legal entity is important, but is actually a detail that can follow. Right? So, and I think it is very much possible to have one or the other or one or more legal entities, as Shweta mentioned, and have a very good, clear governance structure where there is zero conflict of interest. It is possible to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shrikant.
I was going to just add that sometimes we have this notion, when I hear you and I heard this question, sometimes we have this notion that NGO is just, just because it's NGO is better, right? So that value thing, in my opinion, I'm being very candid, is not needed. You make a call, you can easily make a social impact, or even for that matter, even a for-profit organization. There's nothing wrong at all in that. So you got to go to the basics and see which model you want to do and which suits you, right? Because at the end of the day, either you ask customers for money or for donors. So eventually you'll be one of those. So.
Thank you, Shrikant. Next, we have Pankhuri, who had a question.
Yes, thank you, Isha. I had a question actually similar to what Divya was asking for the mid to maybe late 20s age group in my case. I am already working with Pratham Education Foundation. Some of you may be aware of that here. And so I'm in a grant management and a stakeholder kind of a role. But like Shweta, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. But like you mentioned that this sector is constantly evolving, and I have been here for the last a little over 2 years, and I also feel that the sector, because it is constantly evolving, it is often difficult to really see. Maybe like in a more mainstream sector, you would know where you would be in the maybe let's say next 5 years. Here, it's a little fuzzy. So how do you keep building on to your skills, and how do you basically see your career? Is also something I would love to understand from experts here.
Happy to go first. Pankhuri, of course, big fan of Pratham's work. I think they've been doing incredible work in education, Rukmini and Madhav. I think given that you yourself are thinking of the longer term, my advice to you would be what I would advise to anyone in any organization. The first person you need to have the conversation is with your immediate manager and your mentor in the organization, right? Typically what is true of, and this is across industries, right? You need to get oriented to the organization, to the role, and then you start adding value and you start enjoying that, right? And then you're looking for what does the next step look like? It could be, and Pratham, you have the benefit of working in one of the largest education NGOs actually, right? So the options in terms of does the next step look like vertical growth within the team, because grants and stakeholder management for an organization like Pratham would anyways, it's a critical function in any NGO, but specifically Pratham with the large donor base. And in fact, Mohinder, to the previous question, Pratham's a great example of how they successfully tap into retail donations internationally. Pratham Galas in the US for fundraising are a case study for the entire sector to learn from. So, Pankhuri, my advice would be to have this conversation to begin with within the organization, right? What could your vertical growth as well as lateral growth within the organization look like? I think also you need to, and again, right, goes back to what Shrikant was also talking about. it's also for self, right? It's also a moment for you to reflect which part or what role or what function within the organization speaks to your skill set and your interest area. There are, of course, I think today, even from a opportunity to get guidance from placement consultants or organizations which could actually facilitate you to understand other sectors or other organizations within the education sector do exist. So I think to that extent, it is getting a little more mature and structured than it was maybe even 7 to 10 years ago. But I'd say explore what lateral and vertical growth within the organization could look like. Do make the time to almost do a landscape of what else is happening in education, what else is happening in grants and stakeholder management as a function. Also depends on, do you want to go deep within the same sector, or is the meta vision more development, and at this stage you want to try a couple of other sectors? Shrikant, Ravi, anything you want to add?
So I will add, think of your career as almost like a startup. So create a mentor panel for you. I'll just go on a limb. Connect with people on LinkedIn. IMB has a great network. Go and do info sessions. Like when I was switching and doing an MBA or post that, right? We would just call and say, hey, what does it mean to be in the field? What are the 4 functions? Ask them, what does it look like, right? So you can think of, maybe in grant, you're happy, but maybe you want something in the field. I don't know. You got to find out, right? And then build that panel of 4 or 5 people who are almost like your personal mentors, who will help you through this journey. And believe me, there are enough people out there who want to help. You just need to reach out and talk to them.
Thank you, Ravi. Moving on to the next will be Subrata. He had a question, and then we have Divya. Subrata, can you please?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, and good evening all. I'm to the PG Public Policy Batch 2016, and I'm currently working with Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. And if I see my career, I worked for more than 13 years in the development sector. From, you might have heard about the Dhan Foundation, started with the Dhan Foundation in Madurai, and worked much more into the travel area. I really love to work with the travel area. Started in Jhabua, Ratlam, and Banswara. Started my career over there. And my native is in Odisha, that means KBK districts, born and brought up over there. And I worked in the World Bank project in the Rural Livelihoods Mission, and then I took a break and did my public policy, and from IIM Bangalore in 15-16. Then I was with also Chandrababu Naidu's team for some time. Then I went to Niti Aayog for 2 years as a strategy and convergence on National Nutrition Mission. Worked hard, worked with the Dr. BK Paul Saab. Then had some family constraints, so I had to back to Odisha and took a new assignment on the entrepreneurship development. Actually, I worked much more into the rural entrepreneurship, rural livelihoods. Earlier, I worked much more into the financial literacy, financial inclusion, access to finance, access to entitlement, access to rights for the people, but in the other side, from the government and the fund, from the World Bank projects and all. So at that time, I was much more into the impact driven and much more into like how to create value at the community level, at the large scale. At the current assignment, like it is the revenue generating organization. Earlier, Rahul also told like that when we are talking about the revenue generating and the institutional growth and all these things, and if there are some kind of scarcity, like we are much more focusing on the revenue generating than the impact generations. So maybe some kind of mismatch on these things. So that is one part. Second part is that recently I'm designing a concept on the rural incubation model. And day before yesterday, we have signed an MOU with the Aditya Birla Group and raised fund about 24 million, about 2.43 crores for Kasipur, Rayagada, and also in the Kalahandi districts. You might have heard about the KVK regions of Odisha. And it's a typical, it's like a Odisha government who pay punishment transfer data, jahan pe like a hunger death and all sari cheezein bhi hai. I took this as challenge now, developed a concept on the rural incubation model. Why this came into my mind? There are many incubation and the technical business incubation centers, and all are supporting the social enterprises for the maybe commercial platforms or the maybe social cause and all. But all this is the big, they're raising big funds. But those who are like small idea at the community level, maybe at the slum area, at the village level, they have maybe limited fund, but they would like to grow. So my idea here I took this challenge to develop the 300 micro entrepreneurs over here. and the idea has been accepted by the Aditya Birla Group at CSR Group, and it's a quite good. And now my next challenge is that how to really streamline this micro entrepreneurship concept. One, second, the rural incubation model. Can you develop this thing in a better way? And I need guidance and mentors from the across. So would it be possible to connect with some of the like mentors so that I can strengthen this framework of rural incubation model, where our like even street vendors, even the like chota small dukans, so they can access to the technology, they should access to the affordable finance, they should access to the right kind of suppliers, vendors, so that they should minimize their treasury. One, second thing, they should and they should also like give the proper customer services, proper consumer connections, proper profit making and all these things. If you see, I'll give a small example. In the urban area, if I will purchase a milk packet, I'll get in the MRP, like that 24-25 rupees, in the any Omped or any public these things. If I go to the rural area, I have to purchase in a 1 rupee extra because of the free or the refrigerator cost and all these things. So that means whenever we are going to the remote area, the cost of all these MRP cost is costlier for the consumer and the customers. So why don't you like start some kind of rural incubation kind of model so that we can develop all sectors. So I have taken this challenge. So I need some kind of mentorship. Though I am in the Entrepreneurship University of India, but we are into the revenue generating institutions and also supporting many things. So I need some kind of support for strengthening this rural incubation model for the community. Yeah. And also I can contribute to anywhere, if I can also contribute based on my experience and expertise in the rural development, particularly in the inclusion and the rural livelihoods and the financial inclusion also. So the two things I'm putting about this group. So one is I need mentorship, and at the same time, I also would like to contribute to the people who are ever required on my place. Yeah.
Ravi, do you have something to share?
Yeah, so I have some ideas. So number one, there are a couple of organizations who work on livelihoods. You can reach out to them and see you can learn some of. So for example, I'm a mentor at GAME, like that's a global alliance for mass entrepreneurship. So for example, they are working with maybe 5 or 6, like Wadhwani Foundation. So there are many people who are working on livelihoods and some on rural, like the Pollinate Group, LaborNet, right? So these are the names you can easily find out and connect with the CEOs of them and say, okay, what is the model? Have you tried? And can I learn from it? And again, if you need a list, we can connect offline. At least I have made one, and I'm sure Anu and Shweta and Shrikant will have even bigger because they've been in the industry for long. I was just searching because livelihood was an area of my research and trying to figure out. So make a list, reach out to them and learn from them is the first thing I would say.
Worked with the livelihood mission. So National Rural Livelihood Mission, I worked at the national level and the state level, which is funded. It is the Asia's, I think, world largest livelihoods program. This National Rural Livelihood Mission. So I worked before IMB, and livelihoods part is okay. That is part of sustainability, survival kind of strategy. And Janagra also supporting through the microfinance and the certain things. So that's a very good platforms. But next level, when you're talking about the rural enterprising kind of thing, streamlining rural enterprising. So I think that need to be, I think, strengthened much more.
Subrata, we will share Ravi's coordinates with you, and maybe you can take this discussion offline. We are really out of time at this point, Isha.
Yeah, only one question. Divya, I think, had a repeat question. Yeah, we can take Divya's question.
Yeah, I'll keep it really short. Sorry, I just have lots of questions. I'm shortlisting the ones which are important. One, how is the state of impact investment sector right now in India for a young professional? Is it still niche or is it out there? One can try for it. And second, is there merit in going for a post-grad degree like an MPP or an MPA from abroad? Like not just from learning perspective, maybe it would be amazing, but even from an outcome perspective, once you come back to India, does it add to it? So yeah, just want some answers on that.
So impact investing, shall I attempt?
Sure.
Okay. So again, I know most of you guys know more, but I'll just say that impact investing, from my experience of talking to many of the funds, I think the funds are increasing the numbers you can research. I have seen more and more funds come and deploy. So I think it's a good time, and it's a great way, I guess, an intersection of investing and impact. It's one of the interesting career options, what I'll say. And the second part, I'll ask other folks to answer.
Shavita, what do you feel about her second question?
Divya, my honest response would be that, if you're looking from an outcome perspective, after completing a degree from IIM Bangalore, I don't think you need just another master's just hoping that it will translate into better outcomes, which I'm assuming is a better role or a better compensation. I genuinely don't think that is the right lens. However, if you do go abroad to pursue a master's in public policy or policy administration, there are some really interesting courses. I wouldn't, if you do consider it for how it will enrich your perspective, how it will, allow you to better contribute to, even if, let's say, you were coming back and joining the same organization for the same role. If honestly by outcome you meant a monetary benefit of a double master's, including a degree from abroad, like Shrikant said, our salaries are getting better, but they aren't getting so better that we can pay more for double masters.
Thank you, Shravita. And I do see one more hand up. Do we have time for one more question? Don't. Like it's Pawan. Pawan, do you want to quickly ask your question?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Not a question, just a quick comment. So I took the plunge of moving into social sector about a year ago. Worked in corporate industry for about 18 years. Took a break from my career. Wanted to start a small consulting firm. Things didn't work out during the pandemic situation. Got an opportunity to work as a consultant with Oxfam India. So I've been working with Oxfam India for about a year now and heading their individual fundraising for Pan India. One thing that I want to share with everybody who's thinking about getting into this industry, I think the kind of satisfaction and gratitude that you have is something that you will not maybe enjoy in the corporate sector, because I've worked with big giants like Amazon and Oracle in the past. Not only that, with CSR coming into play, there's a lot more opportunity for us to collaborate with the corporates, right? And trust me, maybe I spent just about a year understanding and still learning a lot about this sector, but fundraising is the key. It's the engine of this social sector. Without money, we can't make a difference on the ground, right? So for anybody who really wants to look at making big, look at making it big in social sector, two things that I can think of is mastering the art of fundraising. It could be through institutional fundraising, crowd fundraising, it could be individual fundraising, or through corporate fundraising would be extremely critical. And second, would be in terms of long term. So you have to think long term. If you're just giving yourself about a year or 2 years, trust me, you will be disappointed and you will feel that you've gone back few steps in your career and immediately you look at making a switch into corporate industry. Rather, if you think long term, there's enough opportunities to make a difference. So just wanted to share my view. Yeah.
That's fantastic, Pawan. I think that's a wonderful note to sort of end today's session. I think there would have been a lot more questions that we could have taken, but we don't have the time. I agree with you on fundraising. We actually run a 6-month-long program on fundraising because we think it's absolutely critical for people to learn. I mean, not for nothing is it called the other F word, because people just hate fundraising. But, if you know how to fundraise, you can build a sustainable, scalable organization. So absolutely with you on it. It's critical, key. And also, I love the way that you're thinking long-term and not, looking at short-term, not being cynical. Come for the right reasons into the sector and you'll find, you'll find the sort of the rainbow at the end of the sort of the tunnel or whatever. So thank you very much, Shrikant. Thank you, Shravita. Thank you, Ravi, for your time here. I hope all the listeners are looking at the development sector seriously. Do think of moving. The ones who haven't, do it. If you have any questions, I'm there. The guests are there. If they're okay, we'll share their coordinates. Certainly Ravi's, we have volunteered on Ravi's behalf. And Isha will be in touch with you as well. So yes. Thank you so much for this evening and all the best. Thank you very much.
I will just take. Thank you, everyone. And I am receiving a lot of requests in the chat box about knowing more about ILSS and about the speakers and the coordinates and other collaterals that might have. We will be in touch soon and sending all of this over email, coordinating with the team at IMB and SL. And yes, you will hear from us very, very soon. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Stay well.